Not much is known about Philip II's upbringing. He was born into the proud Argead dynasty of Macedonian kings, a lineage who descended from the founder of the ancient city of Argos, Temenus, who himself was a descendant of Heracles, the son of Zeus. This lineage gave him links to the two kings of Sparta and to the leading family of Larissa in Thessaly, hence he had a faultless pedigree. Philip was likely born in 382 BCE, to King Amyntas III and his wife Eurydice, an Upper Macedonian princess. Of this family, he was the youngest brother. His two older brothers were Alexander II and Perdiccas III. Philip also had three half-brothers, Archelaus, Archidaeus, and Menelaus, the sons of King Amyntas III's second wife, Gygae. In his youth, he would have been raised in the traditional Macedonian ways, with an emphasis on physicality, riding, fighting, and hunting, although his learning and training would also have extended into the political realm, as he would have attended SYMPOSIA, an event where the nobles and intellectuals of the day would talk, discuss, and debate topics ranging from legends to politics to philosophy. Then this would be followed with drinking and sex. Of course, Philip at a young age wouldn't have stayed for that second part of the symposia, but would have heard the stories, intrigue, and discussions being shared, giving him the knowledge of the state of Macedonia and its relations to its neighbours. However, in 368, at the age of 14, Philip's education and life was suddenly interrupted. In the year prior, Amyntas III had died, and Philip's eldest brother, Alexander, took the throne, but due to his young age, he faced many threats to his kingdom. In an incursion in Thessaly, he fought and lost to Theban forces, and looking to neuter the ambitious Macedonian king, they imposed terms on him, of which included surrendering 50 noble sons as hostages. Included in this was the king's very own brother, Philip, and this is where we last left our story. Although the move was drastic, Philip's studies continued, and in fact excelled. He was taught for a while by the Pythagorean philosopher Lysis of Taris, from whom he would have learnt about metaphysics and mathematics. But by far his greatest influence was from Pamenus, or rather his contacts. Pamenus was a famous statesman and general in Thebes, helping to secure its hegemony at the time, and it was his house in which Philip lived in during his enforced stay in Thebes. Although it was really Pamenus' friend Epaminondas and Pelopidas who left their mark on the future king. The former, in fact, had been the master of warfare in his time, since his victory at the Battle of LEUCTRA. Epaminondas was renowned for his innovative techniques of shock tactics and combined deployments of cavalry and infantry. In Thebes, Philip would have also seen the training of the legendary Sacred Band, the elite corps of 300 Theban soldiers, 150 lovers who would fight with all the more ferocity to defend their lover. Their techniques and strategies were idolized by Philip, and he gained a great admiration for the corps. Aside from military influences, Philip was given a first-hand perspective on the Greek POLIS system, how it functioned and largely misfunctioned. Now is a good time to better explain what the POLIS system was and how its existence was Greece's downfall. A polis was a dominating city of an area that single-handedly ruled its region. The people living in these areas shared in the citizenship of the polis. For example, all those living in Attica were citizens of Athens. The forefront characteristic of the polis system was autonomy. Each had its own constitution, laws, coinage, weights and measurements, social customs, and had sole responsibility for domestic and foreign policy. This individuality is very apparent when traveling between different polises. It's best to think of it as traveling to a completely different country that its only similarity is its language. The Greeks believed that their polis system, due to its self-sufficiency, was the best social and political structure. Its biggest strength to them was that it upheld the Greek values of autonomia, autonomy, and eleutheria, freedom and liberty. It enabled them to make their own decisions and the liberty to interact with each other and other Greeks as they wished. These two fundamental values were uncompromisable for them, and they would go to any length, including war, to maintain them. However, these very same ideals and the basis of the polis system was its greatest flaw. If you throw in seclusion, a zealous desire for liberty, and a huge sense of superiority, you've got yourself a xenophobic cocktail. The polis system inherently created hostility between the Greek city-states, as each thought their individual system, culture, and self-sufficiency was better than the other city-states. This prevented them from ever uniting, even against a common foe. In fact, even when the city-states of Athens, Sparta, and Thebes became the hegemons of Greece, they didn't bring any stability nor reconcile the city-states to each other. Of course, some of the Greeks realized these faults and sought to see an end to the polis system. Aristotle, for example, said that if the Greeks could have formed a single political entity, they would have ruled the world. Justin, a source for the period, wrote that for all their attempts to impose their rule on each other, they only succeeded in losing their ability to rule themselves. With no restraint, they rushed into mutual destruction and realized only in subjection that what they forfeited individually constituted a loss for them all. However, one person of significance to us also realized his faults, Philip II. His understanding enabled him to pit polises against each other to devastating effect in his favor, and through this, as Justin says, he will come to subjugate all of Greece. Whilst in Thebes, Philip's brother Alexander II was assassinated by Ptolemy I, who became regent shortly after for Philip's underage brother Perdiccas III. Now, in 365, soon after Perdiccas III was of age and crowned, the Thebans, in a goodwill gesture, released Philip to return home at the age of around 17 or 18. Knowing of his brother's teaching and warfare from Epaminondas, King Perdiccas III assigned Philip as governor of the Eastern Territories, at the head of infantry and cavalry forces. In this position, threats of Thracians and Paeonians penetrating Macedonia's borders was his chief concern. However, it also allowed for him to experiment with tactics that he learnt in Thebes. At this time, King Perdiccas III exercised one of his rights as king, and also married the young Philip to an Upper Macedonian princess, Phila, daughter of Dodas II from the area of Ilymea. This was a bid on the king's part to form diplomatic ties with the unruly Upper Macedonian kingdoms. In 359, Macedonia was put in a state of chaos, as King Perdiccas III, in a move to stop an invading Dardanian force from Illyria, confronted their leader Bardillus in a pitched battle, but the superior Dardanians crushed the king's forces, leaving the king and 4,000 of his forces dead in the field. With their victory, the Illyrians prepared to push further into Macedonia. In the capital, chaos had struck, as there was no immediate heir to the throne, as the late king's son, Amyntas IV, was only an infant. Worse so was the fact that there were many pretenders to the throne, who were all gathering support to take it. Firstly, there was Argaeus, a former king of Macedonia who was enthroned by the Chalcidians and Thracians for a short time during Amyntas III's reign. Hearing the news, he had landed at Methone with the backing of an Athenian army to take his throne. Another pretender was Pausanias, backed by the Thracians, was also marching to take the throne from the northeast. The last three pretenders were the three half-brothers of Philip, Archelaus, Archidaeus, and Menelaus. Given the situation, Philip rushed over to Pella, clearly expecting to become regent until his nephew came of age. However, the assembly, in an unexpected move, bypassed the customary succession cycle of father and son, and made Philip King of Macedonia. The probable reason was that Macedonia faced such a catastrophic state that could lead to its collapse, that it needed an immediate strong leader with full powers, unlike the limited power of the regent. Philip had also, of course, shown great leadership, military, and diplomatic ability in the past 5 years as governor. Although crowned king, and thus in a better position to deal with the incoming threats, Macedonia, and by extension Philip, were faced with more than just internal threats of pretenders, but also several external threats including the Dardanians. In the ensuing chaos of the Macedonians ascending a new king, the king of Paeonia had rallied his chieftains to invade Macedonia from the north. The situation seemed gloom, and Macedonia seemed all but doomed to collapse. However, Philip was not panic-stricken, but rather was ready to move with deadly speed. First on Philip's list of things to do was to consolidate his rule. He immediately called the assembly and in a series of inspiring and eloquent speeches rallied his people behind him and raised their morale. Next, he gathered all and any troops he could, mustering whatever remnants of the army were left and even hired on mercenaries. With this army force, he initiated his first steps of stopping the invaders. Philip knew a confrontation on the battlefield would be the death of him, so he turned to diplomacy, in which he would find himself in luck. The Illyrian king, Bardyllis, decided not to press his advantage with the death of Perdiccas, and sought to make a truce with the new king. Of course, it was not like Philip could deny any of the terms, and so Philip was to marry Bardyllis's granddaughter Odata, continue the regular tributes to the Dardanians, and Dardania was to continue to have their control over parts of Upper Macedonia. Bardyllis likely thought that these terms and Philip's position gave him a stranglehold on Macedonia, something that we will find to be a gross miscalculation, and so Bardyllis returned home. Next of the invaders were the Thracians and the Paeonians. The Paeonians were easy enough. Through a clever selection of bribes to the right people, Philip made the Paeonian king's ambition of invasion lose all momentum. Philip's northern border was secure, for now. As for the Thracians, well, shortly before Philip's ascension, the king of the Odrysian kingdom, Cotys, was assassinated. In the ensuing fallout, the king's son and successor, Chersoplades, faced threats from two rivals, Berisades and Demodocus. After some contention, they split the kingdom in three. Berisades got Western Thrace, Demodocus got Central Thrace, and Chersoplades got Eastern Thrace. With this, all Thracian troops returned home to aid in the internal conflict, and thus, two birds were killed with one stone. Pausanias was now without an army, and now had no claim. With a bribe to Berisades, the Thracians who had just previously backed him put him to the sword. Thrace was satiated, for now. With one pretender down, Philip was now ready to face any of the threats to his crown. Philip's half-brothers were the first to feel his wrath. Archelaus was put to death as a warning to the other two to let go of any claim to the crown, and so the two brothers fled in exile out of Macedonia. Thus left just one last pretender, Argaeus, backed by an Athenian army more than capable of destroying Philip's in a pitched battle. However, Philip knew the intention of the Athenians. They cared little for whoever was the king of Macedonia, rather they had their sights on the free city of Amphipolis. Amphipolis was an Athenian clericy founded in 437. An Athenian clericy was a type of colony that would settle in already inhabited regions and expel all natives, taking over towns and territory. It was founded by the border of Thrace and Macedonia, strategically so it could profit off nearby mines and harness nearby timber for the powerful Athenian fleet. In 424, during the Peloponnesian War, it proclaimed its independence, and ever since then, the Athenians have been trying to reclaim it for over 60 years. Now here we see Philip's cunning. In order to help secure its independence, Perdiccas III had sent a Macedonian garrison to the city. However, Philip had removed the garrison when he recalled all his forces previously. In this move, Philip fooled the Athenians, making them think he had no claim on Amphipolis, and even went so far as to say that Amphipolis was independent, which really wasn't his to say as it had been so for quite some time. Of course, believing that Philip withdrew from Amphipolis and that the city was theirs for the taking, the Athenians stood fast at Methone, leaving Argaeus without their troops. Argaeus wouldn't quit, so with his mercenaries and a collection of exiled Macedonians, he marched to Aegae. His plan was desperate, but he knew he could no longer march straight onto Pella, so he sought to go to Aegae, rally any discontent nobles, and march a sizable Macedonian force against Philip. His plan fell apart pretty quickly. With a petty force and a lack of the backing of the Athenians, Argaeus wasn't convincing anyone to proclaim him king, not to say there were many heads that would have turned anyway. With his plan failed, he returned to Methone, likely in hope to flee and come back with a mercenary force. But he would never make it. En route, Philip ambushed him and in the ensuing fight destroyed Argaeus' mercenaries and killed the pretender himself. Soon after Argaeus was dealt with, Philip sent his own letter to Athens seeking an alliance. In exchange, he would forfeit his claims on Amphipolis and recognize that of Athens over it. Although the Athenians had a dilemma, the Chalcidian League had also sent a request for an alliance, but against Philip, fearing that with his quick and strong strikes against his threats, they would be next. Philip's alliance pulled through in the end, as Athens' relations with the Chalcidians were already strained, and with the carrot of Amphipolis dangled right in front of them, they could not resist Philip's offer. And so, the miracle needed to save Macedonia had happened. Philip's craft of diplomacy, deceit, and bribery, combined with his lightning speed, had stopped Macedonia's impending doom. These very same skills would make Philip's enemies confused and slow to keep up, devastating in the years to come. However, Philip hadn't secured his kingdom. No, he would be doing that for most of the rest of his life. The invaders were more than ready to come back at another time. Thrace could strike again once it had unified. Philip did not have the funds to bribe the Paeonians should they rally once more to invade, and Bardyllis needed only a small reason to come back and finish Philip. No, Philip had merely bought himself some time, but time is all he needed. Time to unify his kingdom, stimulate the economy, and revolutionize Greek warfare.